Welcome to Crawlspace. I'm Tim here today with Lance. Lance, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic today, Tim. I hope everyone is doing fantastic, all of those listeners out there. And most importantly, how are you?
I am doing well, thank you, Lance. I really appreciate when you ask me at the beginning after we've already spoken during the day.
Well, I don't get a true sense of how you are until we record intros.
It's true, and I feel like I don't actually really consider an honest answer until that moment. So
yeah.
I am doing well. Thank you very much for asking, and I hope everyone out there is doing well too.
I'll keep asking too.
Always remember me.
Always remember me.
And Lance, in this episode, we have a real interesting fellow. We speak to a friend, a journalist, a fellow podcaster. His name is James McMahon, and I think this is his third appearance on the Crawlspace airwaves from across the pond.
We love him. He is just a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of insight, but anytime he'll send a message saying, fancy a rant, you sort of have to clear your calendar for the day and just go into it. There's no topic that you should anticipate to stay on for too long because you do meander a bit. But all the roads that you go down with James are worth it, and there's some wonderful scenery along the way, including this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And James has a lot going on. He has a podcast called Shame that's really interesting and really excellent. He's really natural behind the mic, which is pretty cool because he's a writer as well, and I think really by trade. But we speak with him about the disappearance of Andrew Gosden, who he has covered pretty extensively with his writing.
James has been covering the disappearance of Andrew Gosden for a long time. Andrew Gosden disappeared on September 14th of 2007. He was only 14 years old, so he's been missing for over 14 years. And James has communicated with the family, which we get into a little bit here, just how his relationship with the family has developed and where that goes is in terms of I don't want to say the responsibility of someone like James or somebody looking into a disappearance, but I guess you can say, we do get into that a little bit. Where's the line when you're not an official investigator on a case? And again, his point of view, we value so much because he is from a different culture, which is similar to our culture, but there are these subtle differences that I feel are important to identify.
All right, I hope you enjoy this interview. And Lance, we are going to CrimeCon in April next month. Holy moly, this is going to be fun.
I know. I cannot wait to finally see people. I sound like a goddamn broken record when I say this, but I cannot wait to hang out with all of the peers that and our friends and everybody that we've just been, looking at a Zoom screen, just finally seeing people in person. Las Vegas, April 29th, 30th, May 1st. That is Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And if you're on the fence and you need a little push to tip you over to the other side of the fence where the grass is definitely greener, you can use code Crawlspace upon checkout, and that's 10% off your standard badge for CrimeCon 2022 in Las Vegas, Nevada. And we are very excited to be there represented by our new partners in the podcast industry. They help with our ad sales. They help with our brand management. Glassbox Media, fantastic people. They truly rock, and they have an area that's going to be reserved there on Podcast Row, so you can swing by, check out us, and check out all of the shows that they have in their network, and meet the guys, meet the folks that are from Glassbox, and you never know. You might convert over to the dark side.
And Lance, we have a new subscription service that we need to tell our audience about. It is just getting unfurled here. And so we have a link. You can check it out. It's in the show notes. It's crawlspace.supportingcast.fm. And this is going to take place of our old Patreon page, Lance. And we are going to keep this loaded with bonus content.
Right, and this also goes to the Glassbox relationship. We were very limited with what we could do time-wise and just resource-wise when we were on Patreon. It's nothing about Patreon that's making us switch over. It's just the subservice that's on Supporting Cast is more along the lines of what we need, and we've been working with Glassbox to really fine-tune all of the content that will be posted there, so it's worth it for you guys when you do transition from Patreon over to Supporting Cast. You're going to get so much more of what we really want to give you behind the curtain. That look behind the curtain. We want to make sure it's worth it for you. And we already have stuff lined up. and it's
it's
stuff is lined up. It's informative, it's provocative, it's hilarious, and we're super excited about it.
That's right. You're going to get the episodes ad-free, and then there's bonus content. We have our old Patreon episodes are all uploaded up there, Lance. They're all locked and loaded. We've got the Crime and Culture audio. This is a live show we do every other Tuesday night. The only place you can get strictly the audio product of that is here on this subscription service. And we're going to do Ask Us Anythings every month for the $10 tier. So check it out at crawlspace.supportingcast.fm. Thanks a lot for listening. Please follow us on social media at Crawlspace Podcast or Crawlspace Pod.
I thought that maybe we could discuss some vaccine misinformation. That seems to be the best way to. That seems to be the best way to get publicity for your podcast at the
moment. Yeah, let's do that. Get some Joe Rogan sponsorships.
Yeah, let's not do that.
Let's not.
I'd like it to be known that my official line is, you should probably get the vaccine. That's my view.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
I don't like telling people what to do, but if you wanted my advice, then I would get the vaccine. Yeah. Have you guys had it?
Yeah. Oh, COVID or the vaccine?
Both.
Both? I've had both, yes.
I haven't been officially diagnosed with it, but thinking back on some times when I've been sick, especially early on, I don't remember feeling like that before. So I'm going to say, yes, I got the vaccine and the booster, and yes, I probably got COVID. At least probably twice, I think.
Yeah, I mean, me and my wife got it. Yeah, me and my wife got, we're boosted. We're boosted to the gills. But yeah, we got it end of last year. And there was a few times where I thought if I wasn't vaccinated, I'd be in some trouble right now. It was pretty grim, you know, but
wow.
I don't know. It's a weird one, you know, because I'm not like, I'm a bit of a Rogan apologist, you know, like I don't really want to be. I'm sort of in a weird place in my life where it's like I'm very liberal, especially about sort of like social liberties. You know, I'm very into people living their lives the way they want to live it, but also like my politics are pretty left wing. But I do find the call to shut Rogan down a bit weird, if I'm being honest. I don't think it says a lot about our belief in the intelligence and critical thinking of our fellow man. I don't know. There we are. It's a weird world, isn't it? It don't make any sense to me anymore.
It is. That is one way to put it. It's a weird world. It's a weird world where you can have people who have spent 5 decades researching science and viruses, and no one takes them seriously. They'd rather take a parasite drug instead of a vaccine that's been developed like over the course of generations.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I guess I'm a bit more of the thinking though as well, though, that I just think banning things is bad. You know, I just think shutting things down is bad. I think that, you know, things that we thought were fact yesterday aren't fact tomorrow. I don't really understand how my side, like the liberal side of the conversation, has seemingly got such a hard on for authoritarianism that just wants to silence people and shut people down. That really confuses me. I actually think it it destroys trust. In the, I don't know what it's like in the States. I mean, I know to a degree, but, you know, in the UK, like, there's been such catastrophic handling of COVID. You know, at the present moment, Prime Minister may or may not be inching towards the door because the actions of his party just were so disrespectful when people were making sacrifices during this extraordinary time. And, like, I just want sensible people to be having sensible conversations again, and that doesn't necessarily tie with like the criteria for being invited on Joe Rogan's podcast. But I can understand why the distrust of government in the UK has led people to thinking that there is. I mean, a conspiracy comes from disinformation and a lack of trust, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and fear. So it's all part of like, you know, the lack of trust, and the disinformation is all generated and I guess used, or the fear of the community is being like infiltrated. You know, everyone's got some sort of fear about something that's going on in their community, whether it's something out of their control, or maybe they didn't realize that they could control it, but you put somebody in power who manipulates that fear, and then, you know, you can tell them anything. You can do any amount of disinformation that you can get away with.
Yeah, I've always tried to be one of those journalists as well that has been like, you know, if someone is misunderstood, or if someone is dogpiled on, or they're quote unquote misunderstood, then I always kind of want to understand what that's about rather than sort of vilify them. It's like a pretty exhausting way to be, if I'm being honest. Like, because I think life can be so fast and so complex that it's easier to have like binary judgments of people. And I went to do a piece for Vice a couple of years ago at a protest, God, I don't even know how to summarize it. I think it was called a Freedom March, but it was like a load of cranks talking about how COVID was a creation of the New World Order, and it was the Great Reset, and it was just everything they were saying was nonsense. And there was some pretty nefarious types, racists, white supremacists, so on, like hanging around this protest. You know, they were very much on the fringes of it. And I obviously wrote the piece and said that these people were talking nonsense, but I'm super interested in kind of what leads people to that place as well, and sort of trying not to take their humanity away from them. But anyway, we've gone in heavy, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. We didn't even intro the episode. We just got right into it. Welcome to the show.
I love it. Tim and I were just texting, and I asked him, I'm like, are we rolling? Is this the interview? And then he was like, yep, this is it. Happens every time. It's all good.
Do you know what it is a bit? Like when I do my podcasts, I don't really do a sort of, hey, how you doing? Because I do that all in sort of post. But there's just been so many times that I've interviewed people and the best things they've said have happened before the tapes got rolling. I'm not saying that's me in this case, but
it's never happened on our show. Everything, the best moments have always been rolling, and
we save the gold for when we roll.
So I interviewed Francis Ford Coppola about a year and a half ago, and I'm a big fan of his films. And he said something. I used to work in a different room in the house, and it wasn't very well illuminated, and my head was shrouded in darkness. And he said something to me like, I won't do the accent, but he said something to me like, you know, you remind me of Marlon Brando in Apocalypse Now.
That's
and
awesome.
I was like, why did I not press record? Do you know, like that's a moment that you're gonna have to believe me whether it happened or not believe me, because I don't have any evidence that it did. You know.
Wait, so why did you remind him of Marlon Brando in Apocalypse Now?
Well, because, I mean, you know, spoilers, you know, it's a very old film, but just in case you've never watched it before, he is the deranged colonel that Martin Sheen is sent in to retrieve or find out what happened to him. And he's, when you first meet him, he's like sat in his chair, like in the shadows, and obviously because I'm fabulously handsome as well.
Yes, and a fantastic actor.
Yes, of course. Acting is weird, though, isn't it? I can't really. I fundamentally distrust actors. Whenever an actor has an opinion on anything, I'm always like, yeah, you kind of pay to lie. But
well, I feel like some actors can struggle with their own identity because they play other people for a living. You know, they get into other people's heads. Like, who's to say who they are? You know, at a certain point, and you know, obviously they realize it, I think, as they go, but there's definitely a certain point there where you don't know who you are, I think, as an actor, and that's probably when they're the best, to be honest.
Yeah, no, definitely. I do feel like, you know, I'm a pretty creative person. I like doing lots of creative things, making music, and, you know, obviously writing, which is sort of how I apply my trade, and I draw and make cartoons and things like that. But the one thing that I just know that I couldn't do is act. Like, I've sort of occasionally mucked about with the idea of, I don't know, I've sort of like written scripts and stuff and sort of mucked about kind of, you know, trying to perform lines and what's not. And I just feel stupid. Like it's the one thing that like when people do, when I watch a movie and someone sort of inhabits a role where I'm like, God, that is like alchemy. It's amazing. But the other thing I will say is someone who has interviewed a lot of actors, they are like almost with no exception, extremely boring because it's like an art form where you sort of don't, I mean, if there's any actors listening to this, then I'm really sorry. And you may be the exception to the rule, but literally pretending to be someone else, I don't really know. That's got to do something to your soul, I think. Like you spend such a long time not being yourself.
Yeah, and then you have a bunch of people that just laud all of this admiration on you. So not only do you not feel like yourself, but everyone loves you for the most part, or they attack you like you're the center of attention. That's going to be a weird juxtaposition, I guess. Like, how do you deal with fame, first of all? And then how do you deal with it when you're not confident in yourself?
Yeah, no, it's wild. It's that thing as well where you, whenever, I don't know, like, I'm a fan of stuff, and like when I watch shows and there's a character that matters to me, and then you meet them, and you're kind of like, oh, you're not that person, are you? And that's obvious, I mean, that shouldn't come as any surprise, but.
Yeah. I just have a quick story. It's so funny that you have a story about Francis Ford Coppola involving light. And I also have a story about Francis Ford Coppola involving light. He went to this unveiling of, I guess, one of his new wines. This was probably 20 years ago, right. His Coppola brand of wines. And he was releasing, I think it was like a rosé, but it was named Sophia. And it was the new wine. And somewhere along the lines, myself and someone else got the gig to shoot it, to roll camera on it. And there was just one camera. So this other guy wanted to use it. And I was like, that's fine. So this other guy's shooting it, and I'm just kind of like helping out. And Francis Ford Coppola is on stage. And as he goes to start speaking, they shut the blinds behind him. And the guy operating the camera didn't know what to do when that happened, because everything got all blacked out. And he couldn't figure out like the f-stops or whatever to bring the light up. And what we shot was just this like very moody, dark silhouette of a scene. And you couldn't really see Francis Ford Coppola.
What are the chances?
Not as good as your story, but weird.
No. What are the chances? What are the chances? I love the fact that the title of this of the Zoom link you sent me was James Rant. I thought that was really because I messaged you and I was like, hey, can I come and have a natter? Because I really want to have a rant, which I've probably oversold a little bit, but I love the fact. I love the title of it,
Well, tell us about this rant. What I feel like I need to know about this rant.
Well, obviously I've had a natter to you guys on this show before, and I've quite often talked about Andrew Gosden, which is, which is kind of like my case, really. It's like, for the benefit of anyone who hasn't heard me talk about this before, he was a 14-year-old kid that on September 14th, 2007, went missing in London. He came from Doncaster. He got on a train in Doncaster and got off at King's Cross. I live in London. I'm from Doncaster. He was like a little, I guess what you'd call in the UK, a bit of a mini mosher, kind of like a young rock fan. I was a young rock music obsessive. He's wearing a Slipknot t-shirt when he goes missing. I used to work for a rock magazine that I know that he read, and would tear out pages of and put on the walls in his bedroom. And I've written about him and that case, and I've interviewed his father, Kevin, and I think anyone who's interested in true crime and consumes true crime media has like their case. I mean, I know you guys have or had. It's been interesting. Like I really did feel, like I make podcasts and stuff, and I never, I maybe occasionally thought I might do something on Andrew, but as a story goes, as what we know goes, it's like a really perplexing mystery. There's it's almost a bit like kind of Mora in a sense, and you're like, well, he took some money out of his bank account, but he left some money in his bedroom. He bought a one-way ticket, but he didn't seemingly go prepared as if he was running away from home. He had a PSP charge. He had a PSP, the old kind of PlayStation handheld consoles, but he didn't have his charger with him. He didn't take a coat. So there's lots of like, what was all that about? But really, after he gets off the train in King's Cross in London, that's it. Like, there's a few alleged sightings. One of them seems to be credible. was in the Pizza Hut on Oxford Street, which is about a 15-minute walk from King's Cross if you're walking briskly. And a few sightings that have never been confirmed beyond that. But really, it's like from the moment he gets out of the station and the CCTV is never like retrieved, it's taped over. He just vanishes into thin air, seemingly. And then just before Christmas, so actually, yeah, before I say that, like, you know, I do that thing of I check in with his dad and see how his dad's doing, I see how the family's doing from time to time. And when I can't sleep, it's always the subreddit that I'll go to, and there are literally people on there clutching at straws or discussing the same theories over and over again because it's just nothing new. And then just before Christmas, there was a couple of arrests. I believe that it was on suspicion of human trafficking, and one of them had possession of child pornography in relation to Andrew. And that's the police released a statement. The Met Police released a statement in January, and then quantified it with, you know, their investigation. They didn't think there would be news for anything between 6 months and a year, and it's totally ignited the Reddit again, the subreddit, and it just sort of. I've been thinking quite a lot about true crime recently, about what good we do, whether that's like people who create content around true crime or people who are interested in it. And I think that, you know, the obvious exception to this is that I think the work that you do, I always get the title of the organisation that you're on the board of wrong. Remind me the name?
It's Private Investigations for the Missing.
Yeah, I mean, that's so practical. And I really feel as well, like, just the way that Missing and Crawlspace is structured these days is like really responsible and is really good true crime content. But it kind of blows my mind how we're in this place. We're still in this place where we haven't, as consumers and creators, really kind of quantified what our goals are. And it just really made me think about it a lot in the wake of this Andrew news, where like the police had explicitly said, you know, we've made some arrests, investigations are ongoing, there'll be no news for 6 to 12 months. And yet that was what brought so many new subscribers to the subreddit and increased the volume of conversation. And I'm just really interested in that. And I just thought, I bet I could have a good conversation with Lance and Tim about that.
I see what you're saying. So instead of kind of sitting back, it's people who are kind of energized by the news that there might be an actual break in the case and sort of trying to figure out what that break could be.
Yeah, that, but also that is like a springboard for the discussion of theories. You know, I do think that on one hand, I sort of feel like that renewed energy, you know, more than ever, the police want people who might not have come forward, who might know something to come forward. Like, that's good, you know, and I share things on Twitter and what's not because, you know, the day there'd been those arrests, you know, it was almost like, you know, my football team like winning in a cup final or something, you know, which obviously never happens because my football team's rubbish. But, you know, people were getting in touch to say, oh, have you heard the news? And so on. So, you know, I kind of feel it's a bit of my obligation to, you know, share stories. And that's my contribution to, or if anyone did know anything, you know, now is the time to come forward. But the subreddit is, I feel like there is still something that is happening where people just lose sight that this isn't a Harlan Coben novel. Like, this isn't like a murder mystery. And I can't work out, you know, all these years after being interested in the genre, I still can't work out what that's about. I mean, I know that with you guys, like when you first started Missing Maura Murray, you were just bewitched by this case, weren't you? But really, am I correct in saying it started by you wanting to make a documentary about the people who were interested in it?
Yeah. I was actually just going to say that. Hearing you talk about how you're working on wrapping your head around the community that looks into these cold cases, that's exactly where we did start. We had never seen anything like that when we started reading the back and forth and the theories on, you know, what happened to Maura, then connecting with James Renner and seeing all the people that either loved him or attacked him, hated him. And it was just fascinating. It was so fascinating that these people were so rabid about one disappearance. And I mean, for the most part, it's a very productive community. The ones that stay behind the scenes are very responsible, but it's got the biggest front, like the biggest face of true crime. Like if you were to point to like a bad example, and I don't want to like insult anybody. I'm not trying to do that, but what you're saying is exactly why we started. There's so much out there, and does it do any good?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I went to my first crime con last year. I wrote about it for The Enemy, which is like a big pop culture website in the UK, and if anyone was interested in. So I kind of went and just did a sort of fly on the wall piece about my thoughts about it. And when it got published, there was a few people saying about how I was being really quite critical of like the true crime community. And I really wasn't what I was trying to do, because I consider myself part of that. And actually, I came away with tons of admiration for people for a lot of people within that community. And there was a lot of good, I think, that came out of it, and I presume that's the case for other true crime cons, that exist elsewhere. I mean, the kind of, the tea towels with Ted Bundy's face on or whatever, sat very uncomfortably with me. And there was a couple of quote unquote experts on panels where I thought, you don't have a tremendous understanding of psychology and this is like grift for you. But at the same time, I felt like I met so many people there that were just really smart, empathetic people. And almost a little bit like when I'm really into like, comic books and sci-fi and stuff. And when I've been to cons like that, where I thought that these places are like community and home for people. There were so many women there. There were so many people who I think would exist under the LGBTQ banner. There were disabled people there. There were young people, old people, families. It was a very inclusive, like diverse audience of attendees, and I thought that was amazing. And there wasn't that voyeurism, but at the same time, coming by this Ted Bundy tea towel, that kind of that didn't sit very well with me at all. But it's more the case of like it's more the case of I don't understand what it is that makes us think that we can be sleuths. Like, it almost comes back to that kind of Joe Rogan thing of like, well, we're not scientists, we're not trained in those disciplines. So therefore, why do we think that we have an understanding of that law enforcement don't? Do you think it's a lack of trust in law enforcement?
I feel like this is seeping into almost every profession where, people can think they can do things without having much training. Maybe it's just kind of part of like influencer culture too. And I'm not trying to blame things on a younger generation. Everyone grew up with the Matrix as a thing. You learn something quickly, potentially. I mean, there's some deep truth to that. But I don't know, like, do the people who attack the Capitol, do they think they're better politicians than Democrats, I guess?
I think it probably comes back to, I think in some instances they might actually be better politicians than Democrats.
Well, yeah, then now we're hitting something a little deeper, right? Someone who's an amateur doesn't necessarily mean they're bad at something.
It's weird, it's like when I think about how I got into, my real schooling, like, predominantly, I work predominantly as a music journalist, and how I got into music was Nirvana. And for me, it was like, I thought they were like amazing. I'd never heard songs like that played like that. But there was also a reason why I got into Nirvana and I didn't get into, I don't know, like Joe Satriani or some kind of guitar virtuoso, because I listened to Nirvana and went, oh, I can do that. And I don't think that was arrogance so much as it was accessible. I can't, maybe I could, who knows? You can check out my music on Spotify, but I didn't think I could write a song as catchy as Smells Like Teen Spirit, but I did think, oh, that is something I don't have to learn a lot of how to do. And that has kind of like influenced everything I've done in my career, really, where I've gone, I could probably have a stab at that, other than acting, as I was saying. But I don't know. I don't know whether it's more about, a lack of trust in the sense that, as we've seen in America, there is and increasingly in the UK, there is tons of distrust for institutions, whether that's the police or, as you were saying, like January 6th. And I don't know, I don't really know what the answer to it is, but it does feel a little bit like increasingly people want to take it upon themselves to, kind of be what they don't think is there to serve them.
I personally blame Watergate. It all went downhill after Watergate. Everyone started to distrust the government. I blame Nixon.
Do you think that though? Do you not think it?
I think in like current times, if we're speaking like that, but I mean, ultimately, there's always been a distrust to any sort of political body or any sort of authoritative body that is giving you rules. Because I think intrinsically, we just want to have ownership of ourselves, and I'm totally for that. But I do think around the time of the Vietnam War, I feel like the assassination of Kennedy, the Vietnam War, the late 60s, Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King, like all of those, I think that there was a time where it became this boiling, pot, and it started to boil over. And I feel like Watergate was like the exclamation point on that. And a lot of organizations came out of that. A lot of organizations that distrust, for rightfully so, political government systems.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, man. Like I think you're probably onto something there. But I also think a lot of it is about the mechanisms of like how we voice our discontent as well. I increasingly, I don't really like to bash the media because I am part of the media, but I increasingly read things that are reported and know that they are incorrect, and they are influenced by the readership of publications and almost what they want to hear rather than what the truth is, or almost that there are things that can't be talked about because they don't fit the narrative. And I think that largely, it almost comes back to that Rogan thing, whereas like I think Rogan has been really irresponsible with some of the people he's invited along, and he needs to realize that he isn't just making a podcast for like his, bro-y mates anymore. It's the most listened to podcast in the world, and therefore there's some responsibility that comes with that. But I do think that increasingly people have flocked to him because they feel like they're almost a facade of what they're supposed to think. They've almost kind of seen through it, which I guess in a way almost kind of makes me feel better about people than anything. But
well, as far as the pandemic and the CDC and that thing, I think it's easy to look at the people who are making rules and say, well, you got it wrong. You got this wrong. You got that wrong. And now you've changed it to this. So why are we supposed to believe this? And I get that. It's an evolving virus, and I think the rules were evolving because people were trying to get it right. They were trying to stay ahead of it, and at some point, it just we lost. And I think you could probably make a similar thing with true crime. Hopefully, we don't lose, but maybe a similar comparison here somewhere that we're trying to stay ahead of it. We're trying to prevent further damages. We're trying to do the right thing, trying to say the truth, be as ethical and moral as we can be at the time that we know, at the time that we're recording things, Yeah,
I think, though, as well, it's about being realistic about what our objectives are in that, I love that podcast, True Crime Bullshit, although I'm a fair bit behind, but really that is a podcast that isn't about trying to solve a crime, but it's about trying to fill in some of the blanks. And I think that's really admirable. And Sarah Turney's Voices for Justice, which really is about giving a voice to the voiceless. I think they're things that we can do brilliantly, but I feel like that idea of sleuthdom is a strange conceit for someone to take away from a podcast. And I say that, I'm trained journalistically, but I say that as someone who, has occasionally tried to put together theories and, oh, well, maybe that means this or maybe that means this. But I just think those things come with so much bias, that you can't take that out of a person. We always view things about what's happened to us or how we see the world. And that's not what law enforcement is supposed to do. And therefore, that's why they're the people who are there to solve crimes. And that's more what I've seen with Andrew's case, in that you've got people saying, well, when I was 14 years old, and, I could say that, but when I was 14 years old, I mean, it's almost 30 years ago, like my experience at school was different. The town doesn't, obviously we're from the same town, but it doesn't look the same. Everything with economics and politics was completely different then. And I just think that it's that kind of, it's probably an extreme word, but it's that kind of arrogance that we're the people who can Sherlock Holmes this shit that kind of winds me up.
Yeah. Do you ever get organizations that contact you and say that, they're taking on the case now, they're going to solve this, and they want you to give them information, so they source information from you, but they're going to solve it?
I mean, there was a few things that I found online that I fed on to South Yorkshire Police and had a little bit of dialogue with them for a while. And I know that they followed a few things up. It always kind of went that way rather than the other way. I'm quite often kind of asked for comment on things that I've written about. But at the same time, it's more coming from the perspective of I know a lot about a thing rather than I might have a different take on a thing. Do you guys?
Oh yeah, I'm specifically thinking about one interview that we did recently that just drove us crazy, and we were trying to figure out how we were going to approach it and deliver it to the public, and we decided, fuck it, let's just take the gloves off. I mean, these people insert themselves into a situation that they know nothing about, and then they claim to have all of the facts, or they claim to have no ego, and they're only interested in the facts, and they're the most arrogant people we've ever interviewed. And in the same breath as saying, we're only interested in the facts, they'll say something completely inaccurate about this particular cold case. And we have to correct them. And we say, well, that's not actually the situation. And then they'll say, listen, we're just being professional here. We're just being professional. We're only interested in the facts. And you get these people that come in and they're like snake oil salesmen. They're charlatans. What's the carny barkers? Is that that thing? They're frauds. They're frauds, and they take advantage of people, and they look at GoFundMes. And a lot of families have GoFundMes for their missing loved ones. And then they'll come in. They probably, focus it down to the ones that have been cold for 10 plus years. So now they know that the family's desperate. And then they've got a few $1,000s in a GoFundMe and a good community behind them. And they feel like that's the momentum, and the family accepts people like that into their lives, and they take advantage of it. It's really disgusting. And yeah.
I mean, that's some real enterprising shithousery, that is. Do you have that phrase in the States, shithousery?
No, but we do now.
Actually, to be honest, I've used it a little bit incorrectly. Shithousery is slightly... Make sure you press the explicit button when you publish this. Shithousery, it's probably a bit... You would call shithousery, it's quite often a term that's used in sports for someone who does something that... It's used in football quite a lot, where it's almost like, God, I feel like I need to get Urban Dictionary up to sort of say this. Can you get Urban Dictionary up your end?
It says chiefly British term for underhanded conduct or gamesmanship in a sport with the intention of gaining an advantage.
Yeah, no, that's spot on. I'm pleased that we checked that. But it's almost sort of quite heroic. I think there's a Twitter account called Football Shithousery. It's goalkeepers who kind of laugh when someone misses a penalty, for example. It just kind of transcends that kind of sporting conduct. But so actually, really, what you're saying, Lance, is these people are just cretins, really, because that's an appalling way to an appalling way to conduct yourself. Yeah, I feel like I need to listen to that episode and I need to know who these people are, because that is something that I'm interested.
You'll lose your mind.
I think you'll know when you right when you hear it too.
I mean, do you guys lose your temper?
I mean, there was some I guess you could say anxiety or maybe some blood pumping a little bit during the interview, but maybe it's afterwards. I think for me that I kind of sinks in.
So when they came to, did you source the interview from? Did you go to them or did they come to you?
It was based on, I believe, a Google alert for this particular case, and it was because they were getting a lot of press. We reached out to them because they were getting this press because they decided that they were going to be involved with the case. And we were like, I wonder what they know. I wonder on what level they're going to be involved and are they legit? And we kind of went in, and then there was this other individual that they're associated with, and we're like, okay, these people are snake oil as well. So we went into it thinking that it would be tense and sort of like
just awkward, I think.
Awkward, yeah.
The potential for awkwardness.
Yeah, but it went so far and beyond our expectations.
Oh, God. I mean, it's a weird one, though. Like, I interviewed... I do this podcast called Shame. That's my plug. Season 1 just wrapped up recently, and it's about the emotion shame, whether that's, kind of what that does to us and what purpose it serves. And a lot of it's about, like, online shaming and cancel culture and what's not, but... broadly spoken to people who grew up in religious households or people who've had their intimate photos shared on the internet. So it covers the whole gamut, really. It's dipped into true crime a little bit. I interviewed Julie Murray. I interviewed Amanda Knox. And specifically with Amanda, who I've kind of got to know quite well, really, out of doing that interview, there was so much that was about almost like the prejudice or the bias in true crime reporting, in the sense of almost what I was saying of like, well, this person did this or this person is this because this is how I see the world. So, with Amanda, that meant that she obviously did this because she was a teenage girl who had a very natural interest in boys, or she obviously did this because she laughed at some point during the trial. That obviously means this. And it's that with true crime reporting that winds me up so much, of trying to detangle our own prejudices from the way that we view events. And that's such a big thing, I think, with Maura Murray as well, in that, we try to put ourselves... And I'm not innocent at all. In this interview with Julie Murray, I said this thing about, I think it was on your show, and it was the first time I'd ever heard that Maura was listening to that New Radicals song. Is it You Get What You Give? And how that was a song that she was listening to. And because of having an interest in like psychology and, knowing a fair bit about music, that really has influenced how I see the story of Maura Murray more than any fact, really, in that I just think if you're listening to that song in what year's more, is it 2004? And you're driving away, like you're not driving away anguished, you're driving away feeling pretty good about things. And that's a real presumption, like that obviously should, if Maura's story ever comes to trial, that's something that should never be thought of or discussed because it's my own perception of things. But when it's more negative than that, in the, there's an awful lot of people who comment on true crime cases that I think it says more about how they see the world than actually the case itself.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
But I'm super interested in the nefarious industries that have arisen around the genre, like the idea of someone targeting vulnerable people. I mean, that's no difference from mediums, is it not?
Yeah, there's definitely a parallel there. You mentioned the word grift earlier. I do think that's something that families of missing people and murdered loved ones really have to be careful in this day and age. And this isn't necessarily something that is obvious when you meet these people. This is something that can unfurl over the course of many years. But make no mistake, these people are out there and they are watching the case and consuming and following your every word.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Can we talk about Renner?
Sure.
Sure.
So I like James Renner. I need to say this from the off. He unfollowed me on Twitter the other day, so he might not like me. But this interview I did with Julie Murray for Shame, I think he took it as quite a coded attack on him, when really it was supposed to be about Julie talking about how the reporting of her sister's disappearance how it had affected her family, and how she, as someone who sees herself as the keeper of Maura's flame and has to almost defend Maura in her absence, how that had kind of made her feel. And I was just thinking, because Renner is so, I don't know, he's so tied with what you guys do, really, for better or for worse. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but, you know, that's how I first came to hear about him and his work. Like, I don't know. I think what James Renner does is largely good. I think his podcast series are really good. But I think it's that thing of, like, if you set yourself up as the voice of a case, and you almost kind of become a bigger player in that case than most other people within that case, then you do have to see how the way that you would report something would affect other people. I think that the stuff that James has shared about Bill Rausch, for example, is really interesting and has made me think about what's going on with Maura a lot. And, you know, it may well be that there is no connection there, but it's certainly, I think, an appropriate activity for a journalist to be doing. And I think that he's reported on those things with, you know, real integrity and principles. At the same time, I just think you have to see when you would tease a reveal about something to do with Maura's case, or a breaking news, or a coming soon. Like those things, I do think you have to think about how loved ones of victims or the people who are personally invested in the case, how that would make them feel. So, you know, if you listen to this, James, just want to say I love you. I wanted to clarify what I was trying to say a little bit.
And we'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
Thanks to our sponsors, and now we're back to the program.
Yeah, it was well said, you know, and I think even James will be one of the first people to raise his hand if the general question of sometimes, you know, does your ego get in the way of what you do? I think he understands it. Sometimes it does for him. You know, journalism is a very ego-driven profession, especially if you're breaking news. If you're into that type of journalism where you're getting the scoop, you have to almost put aside other people's moral code, and not think about families and get the scoop for your own personal advancement.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot though recently, about almost like the difference between journalism and activism, and about how they're sort of quite uneasy bedfellows. And I think that some of my frustration with like modern media is when it has veered more towards activism than journalism. But at the same time, I don't think there is a completely objective way of reporting. I just think we have to do our very best and consider tone. I think tone's super important, and our own prejudices, how they're not projected on the things that we report on and the things that we write about. I mean, you constantly hear people talking about how, you know, journalists should just report on the facts, which is all well and good, but I just don't think that's how we see the world. Like, you know, we're not Autobots that see things in such a dispassionate way. But I do think it's kind of interesting how we report on this stuff with almost without reporting on it in a way that we're reporting something that we would like to hear. I think that's where the problem arises more than anything.
That's an interesting way to put it.
Yeah, I'm not actually sure. I was trying to kind of phrase it in the right way, and I'm not actually sure I totally have said it how I mean, really. But I think in and amongst everything I've said, you could probably get the gist of what I'm trying to say. Yeah, no, totally. And it's interesting because I was having those similar thoughts. I just didn't verbalize it the way you just did, and it clicked, you know? Yeah, totally. It just comes back to that thing as well, though, of like, why are we doing this stuff? You know, like, are we doing this to, you know, I think the thing with, say, James, for example, and the other thing I've got to say about James is that as storytellers go, as people, his philosophy of crime series, was amazing. Like, it was so brilliant. He is such an amazing storyteller. Like, he's such an amazing raconteur. You know, I've enjoyed his novels, you know, where you know that it's being presented as fiction. But you have to ask yourself, why are you doing this? Are you doing this in the pursuit of truth, or are you doing this to create a brand? And that almost comes back to grift, really. You know, and you know, here I am, like talking. I mean, I'm talking to you guys because I really like you guys, and I always have fun when I have a natter with you. But I also want people to listen to my podcast and check out my Spook Substack, and you know, that's part of the industry that we're in. But
is it not okay? Is it not okay to go after the truth and your brand as well?
Yeah, I think it's fine, but I think it's when the seesaw tilts in the direction of this being about brand building. I think that with Mora, for example, the name Mora Murray should be much better known than James Renner. And I think it always has been, but I think that sometimes it's tipped a little bit in one direction. And I'm very conscious of that with Andrew, for example. Like, I don't want people to ever think that Andrew Gosden is James McMahon's case. You know, I want them to know about Andrew's story and then realise that I'm probably the most authoritative voice on that case within media, but not that they see my name as synonymous with Andrew, because I think that does a detriment to really what we're trying to do here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It's you're saying more like you'd like for people to use you as a resource to get the information, to have the correct, accurate information on that case, and you've done the work because you want the correct information out there. So it makes total sense. And you said that you check in with the family. You said you call the dad once in a while to check in to see how they're doing, and how are they doing?
I think that at the moment I think understandably it's stirred up a lot of feelings for the family. You know, it's a really, I mean, you know, from what the police have reported, you know, words like human trafficking and child pornography, I mean, they're not phrases that lend themselves to restful sleep, are they? So there's a lot of, well, what does that mean? And obviously they're going to have to wait to find out more. You know, my heart really bleeds for them on that. And I don't know whether they feel like some answers are coming, and therefore that can lead to some sort of resolution. And with resolution comes healing. And I don't know whether they're feeling like that. So I can only kind of assume. But I mean, I don't think he would mind me saying this, but I think the thing with Andrew's dad, Kevin, is that when I went to first interview him, which is probably about 4 years ago now, and he lives on like the other side to Doncaster, which is the town I grew up in. He lives on the other side of the town, and you drive down the street at the address that he gave me. And I remember my dad, I don't drive, my dad was dropping me off. And I remember my dad being like, what house is it? And then me being like, well, you know, it's the one with the missing Andrew Gosden poster in the window. And, you know, kind of getting to the door. And I'd woken him up from being asleep. And this was like the middle of the day. And, you know, it's very hard that the man that I was speaking to, who had white hair, and, you know, he's not that old, you know, I think he's probably approaching 60. But, you know, he had white hair, like snow white hair, but the pictures of him and his family on the mantelpiece, you know, he looked 30 years younger. So almost kind of what it's done to him, you can kind of see it on his face, really. And I don't know, you know, when I've written about him, like I've tried to kind of get that across, you know, almost like the impact of what an experience like this does to a person without it having happened to myself. So I don't know, really. I just don't think there's just nothing good about anything like this happening to a person, is there?
No, absolutely not. I can't even imagine the twists and turns that it must go through, that your thoughts must take in your head and in your family.
I think it's you know, I'm not I'm not like a spiritual person in like the traditional sense, and if I was going to get on my soapbox, I could rant and rave about, the problems that I feel like have plagued the world because of religion, but he is very religious, and there's no part of me that would want to knock religion, knowing the comfort that it's given him and his family. Like, I can't imagine what it would be like without having something bigger to believe in. I don't really like that. I don't really like, when people talk about imaginary people in the sky. I probably believe that they are imaginary people in the sky, but I don't really like kind of ramming that in the faces of people who take some comfort from it,
Yeah, that's again well said. I think if you're dealing with this and your family is dealing with something like this tragedy, have all the religion you want, like whatever it takes to get you from waking up in the morning to going to bed at night. However, you can get through those hours. Sure, believe in whatever you want. Like, that's not anyone's place to tell you otherwise, just because they need to show their perspective.
Yeah, totally. I love the fact that you still have Bigfoot behind you, Tim. Was that just for this call, or has that lived there?
He's never taken it down.
Oh, I love that.
I have a bunch of virtual backgrounds, and I think this one was left from the last chat we had. Months ago. Yeah,
I really need to get back on the Bigfoot trail. I made a documentary for Radio 4 just before Christmas that was about, this will literally mean nothing to two men from the New England area, but there's a TV show in the UK, or there was a TV show in the UK called Bullseye, which was a quiz show that I watched when I was a kid, and it was like a combination of general knowledge and darts. You get darts in the States, right?
Oh yeah, definitely darts.
But darts was really intrinsic to like kind of British working class culture, and this show, it ran from, I think it was 83 to 94 maybe. So I watched it all the way from all the way through my childhood, and watched it at my nana's house, and she was a working class woman from Oldham in Lancashire, and made this documentary that was really about me rediscovering Bullseye during a period of poor mental health I'd had, and also what that show could tell us about the shifting sands of the British working class. And it went down pretty well. It's called Look at What You Could Have Won. Some BBC Sounds, if anyone wants to listen to that, it still exists up there for people to listen to retroactively. But I really, 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 really want them, or someone else, if anyone is offering, to let me make a documentary about Bigfoot. And funnily enough, your man, who I met via Chloe from True Crime Twins, and he works with you guys. Remind me of his name?
Greg Overacker?
That's it. Yeah.
Yes.
So
you wrote an article.
So he's a big, I did this article for this entertainment website called Fandom. I sometimes write about, very silly, about if there were any parallels, and there aren't, spoiler, between Boba Fett in the Book of Boba Fett and actually being a bounty hunter. And I thought he was a dude, and he has regularly reached out to me about Bigfoot, saying, hey, I am going to do an accent now, like, hey, dude, why don't me and you go into the forest and look for Bigfoot? And I'm really into that. I really want someone to let me make
Greg Overacker.
I thought so, yeah. I really, really want someone to let me and Greg make a documentary about looking for Bigfoot. So, yeah, watch this space, maybe.
This is probably the best idea I've heard, aside from Pan Man 2, all year.
Yeah, totally. It was weird, though. Like, my main takeaway from my conversation with Greg, I did it quite late at night because just the time difference. And I remember going to bed just thinking, God, I'm really pleased I'm not a bounty hunter, because it sounds hard going. He was saying about how, I've been to States a few times on work, but, if I've been to like Vegas, like I've been to like the Strip, or if I've been to like LA, I've been to, the Sunset Strip or whatever. But he was basically saying how his knowledge of all America's major cities were like the scuzzy parts, So if anyone said to him, "Have you been to Boston or whatever?" It was like the places that aren't in the tourist guide. And I was thinking, yeah, no, that's not the life that I would want, really. But then when he followed it up with, "Oh, I'm actually a Bigfoot nerd," I thought that was pretty wild.
We need to unlayer this idea and really hone in on the diamond that it is. It's a phenomenal idea.
Yeah, this could be a Crawlspace spook media collaboration as productions go. Yeah, no, let's kick that around off air, maybe.
Yes, and then for anyone listening right now who agrees, like, please leave us a message about your interest level in watching a documentary featuring James McMahon and Craig Overack looking for Bigfoot. It's brilliant. It's brilliant, mate.
Yeah, I like that. You guys have got some experiences of kind of gonzo-y journalism, though, right? Like, what was the time that you went up into the mountains with looking for Mora?
Well, yeah, we were heading to a coordinate that had been emailed. I don't know that anyone really thought we were going to find Mora, being so far up the mountain, just like logistically not really being reasonable to assume that, I don't know, someone brought Mora there. Maybe Mora could have brought herself there, but it just seemed unlikely. It was sort of just a cross off this loose end. But yes, I guess you could call that gonzo journalism. I mean, we've definitely done some of that kind of thing. Sure.
Did something weird happen when you were there, though?
Many things. Yeah.
Yeah, I think before we went, I think a couple of years before, we get kind of spooked out. I think that might be what you're referencing.
Did you ever find out who had sent the coordinate?
No. Yeah. Back in the day when those were sent to James Renner, he forwarded them to us. And because he's in another state, not close to the White Mountains where these coordinates were, he didn't really get the distance, because we're around Boston, we're just closer. He's like, "Do you guys want to try, maybe try to check those out?" And we're like, "Dude, it's still like 2.5 hours away, and it's the winter. Like, it's really tough."
I think there are so many scumbags who are involved in Mora's story, and I do think that some of the times that it's come to James's doorstep is so wrong. And I do think, it was only the mildest of criticisms of James, from what we were talking about before. Like, I'm a fan of what he does, but I do think that kind of behaviour just needs condemning voraciously. And actually, I have to say, as fond as I am of Julie and as much as I sympathise with her plight, I am quite surprised that there hasn't been more condemnation for that kind of activity, because whilst I've kind of argued that it's important to report about things with the correct tone and with the correct grace of how this will affect people who are bound by love and by biology to a missing person, that's just, it's just wrong.
Where did you get the idea to do Shame?
Where did I get the idea to do Shame? So I have some incidents from my childhood where I was, I was a child, so it wasn't of my doing, but I was kind of at the epicenter of some events that were that had a lot of shame to them. I was almost like in the blast radius. Things that involved relatives of mine where they had been shamed, and because I was a child that was around them, I therefore that kind of came back on me. And I would say, I've talked on this podcast before about me and my obsessive compulsive disorder, and I think a lot of that is linked to those experiences in my life. And also, I edited a music magazine for years and years and years, and I had a pretty brutal incident of dogpiling on the internet after I'd made what might have been a mistake, what might not have been a mistake, or whatever in that job, which had a really like significant effect on me. And I think that podcast series was me almost trying to work it out in real time. I do think we're sort of in an incredibly shrill time right now where, I don't know, the mob rules really. And podcast was almost a little bit like a kind of live experiment really, in the sense that I wanted to try to connect with other people who'd had similar experiences like that, or people like John Ronson, who I interviewed on the last episode of the season 1, who knows a lot about shame and kind of people's motivations and the history of shaming, to try and kind of work out how I felt about it all, really. And I have to say it kind of helped, really. Like I found a lot of commonalities. I mean, obviously, like Amanda Knox's story, for example, is far more extreme than some people being mean to me for, a couple of days on the internet. But it helped me. It helped me understand what happened to me and gave me a little bit of comfort, I think.
Very good show. Very good concept. And love the fact that it's like almost therapy for you.
Yeah, no, absolutely is. I mean, there's a big thing with OCD where the treatment for it is it isn't really about exploring like the substance of your obsessions and fears and ruminations. Like, it's very much about trying to change the cognitive thought process. So, for me, I'm not sure I totally explained that about my childhood so well, actually, but it really was that thing of like some shitty things happened to people close to me. And because I was in the blast radius, I took a lot of that on. And they formed like the sort of mental anguish that I've taken into adulthood. That's a better way of explaining it. The second bite of the cherry. And whilst it's that thing of like, with a lot of other mental illnesses, you would talk about the things that happened to you and you try and make sense of them. With OCD, you don't really do that. You try to change the way that you think generally, rather than trying to find any sort of like truth in trauma. It's a thing, it's really, that's the standard way of like looking at the treatment of OCD, with this thing called exposures, which is the things that you are scared about. You put yourself close to them and live with discomfort. So for me, I'm obsessed with the idea of being shamed. So actually doing a podcast about shame was an exposure. But I just think that sometimes, when it happened to me on the internet, I would go into Tesco's, or Tesco's is a supermarket in the UK. I'd go into Tesco's to buy, I don't know, like some beer or some mashed potato or whatever. And I'd be stood there in the supermarket thinking, everyone knows about me. Everyone can see, like almost like I'm stained, and reconnecting with other people. There's a thing that John Ronson says about how the cure for empathy is, I think he actually paraphrased it from someone else, but how the cure for shame is empathy. And I found that being around other people who'd had that experience and learning from them really did make me feel good, which is one of the reasons why the podcast exists, really, that other people might be able to take that from it.
Now, what about people like Tim and I? We're not afraid of anything. We're cold-hearted SOBs. What advice do you have for people who aren't afraid of anything?
I mean, is that true though?
No. I'm terrified of most things.
Yeah, I mean, just applying my cult psychology to the two of you. I mean, I do feel like, Lance, you wear your heart on your sleeve, and whilst Tim is maybe the slightly more, I don't know, sort of, almost like the slightly more detached of the two voices, I do feel like Tim's got some fire in his belly as well.
There's some fire. Yeah, I got some fire.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, fear's like good, isn't it? Like, fear is the thing that stops us from making terrible mistakes. It's the thing that almost sort of like keeps us in line and keeps us alive. But with OCD, it can become excessive. The pandemic, for example, I think one of the reasons why I may be a little bit moderate on my views about things like lockdowns and, some of the restrictions that came into place during the height of COVID is that I know how those things can affect people with OCD. OCD is about accepting risk, so therefore being told that if you step outside your front door, like, you might drop dead. Like, that's really bad for people with OCD. Like, we have to try to kind of find a moderate. We have to find some moderation. And we don't live in a world with a lot of moderation right now, so it can be tricksy.
Isn't it interesting that we started the conversation on the topic of fear, and we're kind of coming full circle? Only we're defining fear. We're putting fear in a different light.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of my stuff really is in, like, the things I'm interested in and things I write about and talk about. It all really kind of comes down to, like, the same sort of central tenet, really, which is how people relate to each other, how people interact with each other. Whether that is, when I've written about true crime or even my kind of music journalism and shame, obviously, it is about the dynamics between people. I think that's, like, ultimately, I think everything's boring other than people. Like, everything, like sport, music, politics, it's all about people and psychology and how we relate to each other and how we can kind of try and create something better amongst us all.
I love it. And you started the conversation by saying that we at this time don't have sensible people having sensible conversations. But I think we just proved that I think we're somewhat sensible people having a pretty sensible conversation right now.
I think that's a really good. I think that's a really good place to leave it, and I can go have I can go eat the pie that I can smell wafting from my kitchen.